Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action. Allen.
Deep downfield. Wide open.
Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host today, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt, as always, to talk Bills and most importantly, Bills training camp on its way here in about 5 days. Rookies have already reported, people coming in and out. It's a really exciting time to get back to football, Mike, as we see this very shortly. The Bills are one of the first teams back in action, so we got an action-packed final edition training camp primer here today here on the Going Deep podcast. But first, Mike, want to mention Underdog Fantasy. We're back. Cover One is excited to announce a partnership with most dynamic name in fantasy football, Underdog Fantasy. It's a really great way to get going on fantasy. If you want something to supplement like your fantasy, try out Underdog Fantasy and use promo code COVER1 to match $100 in your first deposit. It's pretty cool. It's season-long fantasy football. It's great. You can join in, invite your friends. We have some specials going on. We have some Cover One leagues happening, so make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy using promo code COVER1. Really great time there. But Mike, how you feeling with training camp just 5 days away?
I'm doing great. I enjoyed like my last non-football weekend of the summer. Talion Festival in Buffalo, Renaissance Festival in Sterling, New York, company picnic. But every week forward, I will at least be at Bills training camp, a preseason game, or a college football game, basically from now till January. So I'm looking forward to it. Football season is the best time of the year. And I think we're all anxious as Bills fans for this all to get underway on Sunday.
We sure are. It's been a long time coming. You guys have stuck with us through the summer. We got started for you earlier this year here, the Going Deep podcast here on the Cover One Podcast Network. Please like and subscribe on all podcast platforms. It really means a lot for you to give us a great review. You guys have been doing great on Apple Podcasts, so we really appreciate that. But you've been through us all spring, all summer. It's time to give back to everybody here in the fall as we get to do what we love to do. As lots of stuff going on. Meet up on Saturday, Uncle Jumbo's in downtown Buffalo. We have some training camp stuff coming at you on Sunday. We have all week, I believe next week, we'll have different people in and out from the Cover One crew to collab, make content. We'll bring you our chop ups and our clips. Make sure you check out the specials that Eric Turner had with Mitch Morse and Rick Bates last week as well. So make sure you check out all that stuff that we have on our podcast network, and some great written content still up there. Greg Vorse, Ryan Sullivan, a couple of guys really doing, Rob Quinn back in the action. So a couple of guys really making some great written content here at Cover One. But it's time to talk about the primer and what we're looking forward to about training camp, Mike. What we're eyeing, what we're gonna we talk about all the stuff we're doing. What are we going to be watching for? That's the big question that I have, Mike. Like what are we going to be creating content on? And that's the topic for today. And that's going to be the most important position of all, and that's quarterback. And first and foremost, yes, we can state the obvious. We don't want injuries. We're going to get that one out of the way. We don't need to say that every time we reference training camp and throughout the summer. No injuries. And good question about training camp tickets. There's been some crazy stories about training camp tickets going on right now. So if you guys see any, make sure you retweet and you help people out. Training camp tickets were we're going to start there actually, and then we'll get into the position group. Mike, what was your opinion on this ticket rollout? Like this is a big topic. This is a primer. This is a big topic that we've had internally at Cover One. We have like docs going, like it's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. And it's one of the consequences of having a really good football team with high demand going into the first training camp at St. John Fisher in 3 years. This was bound to happen. It's unfortunate that something that a lot of us fans have taken for granted in the past 10, 15 years is now become a high demand, hard to attend event. But that's just the way the NFL is with a lot of things. You have Tampa Bay where they're only letting their suite holders and high end ticket holders go to their training camp practices. General public can basically not even get tickets to their training camp. It was a mess. Obviously, Ticketmaster was overwhelmed when they put the tickets out to the general public. A lot of season ticket holders, they were grabbing as much as they could just to make sure that they were secure and got to attend the practices they wanted. I was lucky. I was able to get tickets for the Sunday, Monday, and then a Saturday one. First couple to go with Cover One guys, and then the last one to go with my wife. I think the one thing that people are forgetting a little bit is I think the Bills want to make their stadium practice into the next big thing where they open that up to a lot of people. That's going to be the practice where you're seeing 10, 15,000 people at. But the St. John Fisher, it's just you got a Super Bowl contender. And I think I read something. If you had all the tickets up for all the practices, it's about 1/3 of the Bills stadium capacity. So it's just unrealistic to think that something that's free is going to have availability when you're a Super Bowl contender, you're the best team in the NFL, and you have the passion and demand of Bills Mafia.
And it's honestly the only time you bring your family. A lot of times you're, some of these diehard fans of Rochester, especially, bring their family, bring their friends, bring their little kids. And this is the event to do so. You up close and personal with players, with a really good team. Like, this isn't up close and personal with a 3-13 team anymore. It's up close and personal with stars, with Von Miller, with Josh Allen, with Stephon Diggs. They've none of them. I mean, early on in Josh's career, he's been here, but not in recent memory have they been up close and personal to such stars. Like, you don't understand unless you've been there. You're really intimate with these players. Like, you're really close to them. I have memories as a kid growing up with, and we've been here a long time, and I'm not young anymore, like, where you're able to get up and close and personal with these players, and they'll sign your hats and they'll talk to you. And it's a really good atmosphere. And, people want to track that down to their kids, myself included. And I'm not sure that's going to be able to happen. But like, that's just a matter of where the team's at. And that's just a really interesting way to open camp, because used to be open. It would never be full, Mike. It would be half full on weekdays. Weekends, you'd have to have a ticket for it. You could always get one at the door. Like, they'd have a stack of them. So you just have to go to Wilson Farms, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just a different climate right now than what it used to be. And it's not just that the team is great now and that the team used to suck. Obviously, that plays a role. But the NFL is changing. The Bills, when they first started these St. John Fisher training camps, they were having night sessions. They were trying to show off the team and in prime time, and it was a go-to thing, even though they weren't always filling it out. And normally it'd be the night ones that were selling out. The NFL has kind of gone away from the average fan, the casual fan, and in regular people. They're all about the money. I'm honestly surprised at this point in time the Bills don't charge for some of these training camp practices, because they could if they wanted to, and they would still, I think, would sell out even if it was $5-10 to get into these. It sucks that something that so many fans used to look forward to is now becoming a tough event to attend. All I can really say is it's just where the NFL is trending. It's not the way it used to be. And even though a lot of people aren't going to be able to make it, I'm still glad that the Bills do have it and still give the opportunity for people to attend. And you factor in that, like I said, the night practice at the stadium, that's going to be a lot more accessible for many people. So while a lot of us won't be able to go to St. John Fisher, there still is that opportunity to go to the stadium, see them practice during training camp. And last year they had 3 of those practices where they were getting 10 to 15,000 per practice, which is more than double what you'll see at all these training camp practices combined. If you're talking like 40,000 people combined for those 3 practices last year.
Yeah, and Fisher University now, St. John Fisher University, officially, it's an interesting place, because it's not just like you walk up to a field and it's a D3 and it's like, there's multiple fields. I've actually known players. I work with people that have played on their actual college team, and this is a big event for them. They're the people that walk around and help them and bring them water and like kind of set it up. They do a lot for the Bills, and that's great. But really what it does is it steps up. Like, you look at the shop, it's not just a pop shop, like a little cart. The store is huge. Like, it for like a really 12 practices or whatever it comes, whatever they keep eliminating it down to, it's a huge store. You can buy jerseys, tickets, footballs. Like, it isn't just your small scale, like, here's a Bills shirt, here's a Bills hat. You can get a lot of cool stuff in the store. There's like 15 food trucks. It's fun. You can get all types of different food and beverages and like corporate sponsors. You got like businesses and tents, and that's another side of it that you don't even see as a consumer. But it really is more than just like, you kind of roll up and you kind of see the Bills go through like special teams drills. Like, it's a whole atmosphere there. And, I've gone my whole life, so I've got to have seen it get better and better and better up until the pandemic for a couple of years. But I mean, you're talking about, you're able to walk in, you're able to, young Bills fans, you're able to convert at a young age, get them in front of some of these stars, get them a jersey, get them a hat, get them a signature. And it really is a something you would remember forever with your family. It's not just about like, wow, they didn't do anything today. I've been to practices where they did not, like Sean McDermott's called it early. I covered a Bills camp practice specifically as a media member, where I think he called it like an hour or 10 minutes early. And I remember saying to myself, like, what are the people going to do that wanted to come for this? Like, but you forget that, like, it's a full fan experience, and St. John Fisher University does it right. Like, it's quite frankly done right for a D3 university. The players you see walking out of their dorm rooms, I've caught that a bunch. It's really cool. There's a dorm room behind practice that they come out of, like a training room. The dorms that they stay in are on the left, and it's kind of cool. Players just walking around like Pee Wee football. I mean, it's really cool to see someone of this stature, whether it's Von Miller making hundreds of millions of dollars, or Josh Allen, one of the best players in the league, just kind of putzing around a D3 university. It's something that's just like, kind of just the scene of it all, like the atmosphere, the environment, and it brings out the best. Like a simple toe drag on the sideline, you'll act like the Bills won the Super Bowl. If it's busy, and some, it could be even like Tavon Austin makes a play in the corner of the end zone. I mean, it's an uproar, Mike. It's totally, it's very unique. It's very interesting. Even like on one-on-one drills, you got some people like watching and paying attention, and the bleachers are packed. You got people walk or, kind of filing in around it. It's a really unique experience, and I recommend it to anyone that can go ahead and make it out. It's different than you would ever expect it to be, because of all the extras. There's stuff that kids can do, there's stuff adults can enjoy, and then the interaction with players. You can't get that on, maybe the first row under the end zone by the tunnel, but you really don't get this kind of access to players that you do at St. John Fisher. So really all encompassing, a really cool picture. It's really scenic. It's just kind of my memories as a kid here, especially being from Rochester originally. It's kind of part of my summer. And because easily, I totally, until this year, easily get tickets every time to every practice that you were available for. There were some afternoons and some nights, but Sean McDermott all mornings. And it's a really interesting atmosphere that it's really tough to get to, because you got to bus in. And then you got a whole parking lot of people paying to park at houses like you're at a Bills game. It's a really cool total picture for training camp. And I wanted to make sure we like spread a light on that for anyone who can't come, not from Rochester, not from Buffalo, to kind of paint what that looks like from a fan perspective. Now, as we enter and as we start to make content and we start to talk about the team, there's a lot to get to talk about there. And we'll talk about it today, and we'll talk about it throughout the summer. As I love the preseason, Mike. A lot of people I hate preseason. I hate game 2. I hate game 3. I hate game 4. But the preseason really interesting to me. And that's where I come up with a lot of my content. That's where I come up with all my training camp and predictions of who's going to make the roster, trades, and what I see happening based on, you can tell a lot over the years through Sean McDermott and who he's playing in the fourth quarter. There is verifiable evidence on some of his playing styles of who's still in games and what that means a lot of the time. So, Mike, right then and there, I know we did a good job of painting the picture, but is your favorite thing about training camp this week going to be that football's back, that the players are like, what is your favorite? It could be anything thing about Sunday morning.
For me, it's just that it's back. Part of the news cycle again. You turn on the radio in the morning, the afternoon, Yep. You're going to be hearing Bills talk. You turn on NFL Network at 7:00, ESPN. whatever time NFL Live is. And you're just going to be hearing football, and that's going to be the way it is from this Sunday forward, like I said, until the Super Bowl concludes. And even afterwards, you still have the Combine, the NFL Draft coverage. So it's really a nonstop period until the NFL Draft concludes, and then it quiets down. Right now, this is the end of the dead period. So I'm just excited to have stuff to talk about. As far as what goes on the field in previous years, that would probably be more interesting to me than in the past. Like, it's really crazy to think, like, this is the first training camp at St. John Fisher where we're going in, where we have total trust in the quarterback. Even 2019, at that point in time, there's a lot of questions about Josh Allen. He was only entering his second year. A lot of people didn't know, was he ready to make a sophomore leap? And obviously he ended up doing that, and he was much beloved at that point in time, being a high draft pick. But now you're going into a training camp where you have bona fide stars on this roster. You don't really have a ton of questions. Like, every training camp, there's always you always get excited about the new faces. Yep. You get excited about who the quarterback is, who some of the skill position draft picks are. But there's really not a lot of training camp battles where you're like, how is this all going to break down? Could this be the kryptonite for the Bills this season? There are some battles that are interesting that we'll get into during this show, but it's kind of more of just a relief going in, knowing we are legit. The Bills don't have much to worry about. And I outside of injuries, which obviously can change things, cross your fingers, nothing happens. It's kind of a relaxing feeling going into it, to go into it without any drama, off the field problems, injuries, any of that crazy stuff that you just hate to hear about during the offseason.
And injuries are going to happen. We're going to have an injured player in training camp. Hopefully it's someone of not magnificent stature, but you're going to see it. The Bills are very good at it. Great training facilities. They take it easy. Like we mentioned earlier, Sean McDermott will call it if he needs to. It's not something that he pushes through. So the Bills have been relatively healthy, knock on wood, throughout the tenure of Sean McDermott. And once again, part of the reason they're keeping their stadium in Orchard Park is they have an amazing training facility. Like, there's no reason to do anything to that. Essentially they're going to have a great football facility in Orchard Park, New York. Random area to have it, but it's going to be great and fantastic, and a great stadium with great facilities. And why it's relevant to training camp is because that's kind of the sports science, all the data around in their shoulder pads and what it's telling them about player hydration and speed compared to heat index, all types of different data that they absolutely analyze on a day-to-day basis and make decisions to keep the team healthy. And that's more important to a Super Bowl aspiring team than maybe getting in a couple of reps. Now, maybe down the roster, that's more important to those players. But the Bills as a whole, they are thinking about long-term here, Mike. As you'll always say, like, I just don't want any injuries. Me, I'll get into a little bit more about the UDFAs and some of the other people that I still think could vie for a roster. And that's kind of where as we get into the football side of things now, as we put aside the sentimental feelings of training camp. And for me, I didn't address it. My favorite thing about training camp is just the excitement of the other people that are there, not myself. I can temper my expectations. I love being there, but I just love watching little kids being excited. I love watching parents taking their kids. And I just love watching, like, the average fan, not some of you guys who know a lot about football, not the podcaster, not the media members, but I just like watching the average fan that just thoroughly enjoy being there, even though they might not know the third string cornerback. They look in their book, or they pay $5 for the guide. That's cool to me. Like, that actually absolutely makes me excited and happy that there are general fans to enjoy this sport. And we all take it to the next level. Anyone viewing here, anyone on Cover One, we're able to take that and then take it to the next level. But it's really cool just to see the standard fan and their family out there having a day with Bills football. But Mike, I wanted to get into the offense first and what we're looking for. Generally, the defense is ahead of the offense, pretty much historically. We'll see if that's still the case with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It might not be anymore. We don't know how that'll go, as this is really the first year in person, through the pandemic, that we get to see Josh Allen in person early on in training camp. Now, are your expectations from this, just overall offensive expectations, that are they going to generally, which historically have been behind the defense? Are you going to see the defense really make plays, cover the receivers, picks, sloppy offense? Or do you think that the Bills are into a place now where they're not going to be able to guard anybody because of the rapport Josh Allen has with Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs, even Isaiah McKenzie's, Gabriel Davis's of the world?
Yeah, so in previous training camps that fans have had access to, the defense has typically gotten off to a strong start. There's been a lot of bad Bills offenses throughout the years, though, so that definitely helps play into it. And even when the Bills had decent offenses under Tyrod Taylor, that wasn't a passing attack. That was a rushing attack, so you didn't really expect a ton out of that right off the gate. I think this offense is going to be strong off the gate. Out of the gate, they might still have some hiccups early, some mistakes, gaffes, stuff like that. But I don't expect them to look horrible early on or overwhelmed by the defense. I am looking forward to some of the offseason storylines and some of the battles on the offensive side of the ball, though. Obviously, first, Aaron Cromer with the offensive line. It's going to be really interesting to take a look at the O-line during camp, see how that all comes together with Saffold taking over at left guard, throwing in Bates as the full-time starter at right guard. That's what we're assuming. Will there be a battle at any position? Who knows? Probably not, but there is some good depth across the offensive line. You look at wide receivers, Jamison Crowder or shoe-in for the slot. Most likely, but you did bring in Tavon Austin. Isaiah McKenzie gets the extension. Be interesting to see how that wide receiver battle plays out, and can a guy like Tavon Austin play his way onto this squad? And then most notable, how is this offense going to look with Ken Dorsey taking over at offensive coordinator? Are we going to see changes? Is a guy like James Cook with what he brings in a passing role, receiving role, is that going to change some of what we see from this Bills offense? That's going to be something really interesting to watch in training camp, especially with some of the projections that you're seeing for Cook going into the regular season. If he's going to be as dynamic as what many national pundits are saying, that's going to be something to watch very closely, because typically rookies do not get much of an opportunity early on, but at running back, that tends to be a little bit different, especially with McDermott drafting guys like Singletary and Moss over the years. So those are the things offensively I'm going to be most intrigued about going into camp. Josh Allen, it's almost like a non-starter. Like you feel confident in what he brings to the table. Even if he struggles a practice here or there, I'm not going to be charting his passes and caring if he has a day that he goes 6.
That was for 2019.
Yeah, like I'm not going to worry if he throws a couple interceptions in a practice. Yeah.
How about this stat? It's probably going to be talked about a lot now, but we're going to throw it out there. The Bills haven't lost a preseason game in 4 years.
Wild.
How wild is that stat? 4 years.
The one A.J. McCarron comeback at the Chicago Bears where they were down like 17 points in the fourth quarter or something like that.
They lost.
Or was did that predate it? I'm trying to.
That was the start of the winning streak. Yeah, that was the first winning game of the winning streak in 18. Yeah. So funny story about that game. I was in the delivery room with my first child for that game, and I looked at my phone after, everything was calmed down, and was like, wow, the Bills came back and won with A.J. McCarron, and I traded him. All the way to this year, to where my second child is due kickoff September 8th. So it's kind of like a full circle during the winning streak of the Bills preseason games. But I do think there's something to that. Like, you have to have roster depth to do that, to win, for 4 straight years of preseason, like the Ravens historically did. And they were like a really good preseason team based on their numbers. And it was like, who cares? It's the Ravens. Really, like, what's the big deal? The Ravens are always good, like, especially during that winning streak. So I don't know. There's definitely some team wins there that, like, we're not talking about QB wins anymore. I know a lot of people have a problem with QB wins. I buy into QB wins a little bit more than others. I still want the argument of, like, you can't win it all without a good quarterback. I don't care what you say. So I think QB wins are still a thing. But, like, put that aside for a second. The preseason team wins are huge to me. Like, historically, teams that do well in the preseason are good. Like, it's not a true tried and true statement. They're at least deep. anything can happen with your, once again, back to quarterback, that player gets hurt. And then all of a sudden you have problems. But to me, not losing in 4 years, that's pretty cool. Like the team's that good. You're going to have that much depth and a lot of battles. Mike, you already alluded to the receiver battle. And the Bills, to me, have players across the board that could be 2s and 3s on every team in the NFL. It isn't just Stephon Diggs. It is. But put him aside as the receiver 1. There's nothing really to talk about there. Let's keep going down the list. Gabriel Davis, we'll see what everyone's excited about him being receiver 2 here in Buffalo. Think it's his job. I don't really think there's any way he's not receiver 2. Let's keep moving. Receiver 3 is the first interesting spot with Jamison Crowder versus Isaiah McKenzie. Does Khalil Shakir factor in here too? So there's definitely some depth there that teams would like to have on their roster, starting at receiver 3, that I think that every team in the NFL would like the scenario of what the Bills have from 1 to 4 personally. And then you're not even getting into like some really promising players like Shakir and what he's able to bring at a 2nd round grade by a lot of pundits. So there's definitely a good battle going on at receiver, Mike, and we're going to talk about it right now. Who do you have at the receiver room making it out? And we're going to revisit this in late August. So in like 5 weeks, call it. We're going to have obviously Diggs and Davis. And beyond that, you have Crowder, you have Shakir, you have McKenzie, you have Kumaro. Is that the 6th lock, or do you have something else?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel the same way I did when we last did this earlier in the offseason.
No changes?
1 easy. I'm really interested to see how Davis does perform this year, because Bills Mafia is super high, and I'm super high on him too. But I think some of us might need to pump the brakes a little bit. I love the potential. I do think he could be a guy that could be a double-digit touchdown guy in the future. I was listening to one of the GR shows. I didn't realize the Bills' touchdown record for a single season is like 11. So I think that's something that Diggs could, not Diggs, but that Davis or Diggs could go after in the future. But we're still talking about a guy that was the 5th target on this team in recent years. So it's not a guarantee that Davis is going to automatically be 1,000-yard guy, 10 touchdowns, 60 catches. I think we're all hoping, based on the way he played in the playoffs last year, but he still has to prove himself that he can be a high-end number 2, like we all hope. Crowder, I feel pretty confident in Crowder as the slot guy. We've all seen him do it in Washington and New York. I think in Buffalo, it's a good position for him to take over. A little bit different than Beasley in some ways, but get a little bit younger at the position, stay cheap. Crowder is probably their most underrated move of the offseason, bringing him in. I'm going to give the edge to McKenzie at 4, just because he's been with this team for 3+ seasons. He has that rapport with Josh Allen. He's a little bit gadgety, but when given an opportunity, he has stepped up big. I'm not going to pretend like he's going to be some superstar. I think some of Bills Mafia gets a little excited with McKenzie based on his Miami 3-touchdown performance in the 20 season finale, and then the Patriots game last year where Bill Belichick just refused to adjust to what McKenzie was doing to his defense. But that said, I think McKenzie could be a 25 reception guy. I would never say he's going to be a 40 reception guy. Shakir, I'll say he's going to be the 5, just because he's new to the team, the organization. There is going to be a learning curve, and it's not like he was a 2nd or 3rd round pick. He might have been projected by many to land there, but the Bills did get him in the 5th round. I'm not going to project a 5th round wide receiver coming to a Super Bowl.
Top of the 5th. It's top of the 5th.
Yeah. Top of the 5th, but I'm not going to project a guy like that to come into this offense that's already stacked with weapons to come in and be a 40 reception guy from day one. Maybe he can be a 20, 25 reception guy, but if so, I think he's going to have a little bit of a learning curve early in the year, and then maybe start taking off a little bit closer to the end of the season. And then Jake Kumaro for special teams purposes. And if Tavon Austin finds a way to slip onto the roster and earn a spot as a returner, good for him. I'm not against him making this team. Obviously immensely talented and skilled, but just really hasn't put it together at a high level in the NFL outside of some all right seasons scattered throughout his career.
let's not forget, it's only like 10, maybe 20 picks difference between Gabriel Davis and Khalil Shakir. The Bills said had they had a fourth, Khalil Shakir was top of their list, even in front of some of those tight ends that went there. So they do view him as a fourth round pick. I do believe, like, I seriously, when the Bills were on the clock at the Terrell Bernard pick, I seriously had Shakir on my board of like best one toward the best available in the late third. So I do believe that, like, he probably rounded out more in the top fourth. And there are plenty of rival GMs that said, how did the Bills get him in the top of the five? Like, why did we let that happen? So there is that. It isn't just like some player like Derek Rogers that the Bills like. He legitimately scouted out and didn't have any red flags to be a day two pick.
Hey, I'm happy he's on the Bills. Like, I definitely could have seen him as a day two.
He's an injury away from getting some time. Like, straight up, he's an injury away from seeing time.
I think the Bills got lucky. It was a combination of there was already a run on wide receivers, and a lot of teams had already taken theirs in the second round, first round, and that allows a guy that was a day two talent to drop. And I definitely think he has a solid NFL future, but in this organization, you have to prove yourself. You're not going to just be given a spot. So if you see Khalil Shakir getting solid playing time beginning of the year, you know it's because he's earned it during mini camp, during training camp, preseason, and so forth.
Yeah, an interesting player to track, and that leads me into the returner battle, Mike. It is kind of relevant because all the returners are out of this group. You have Isaiah McKenzie, Marquez Stevenson, and the aforementioned Khalil Shakir. Now, that's a way for one of those guys to make the roster. Obviously, we have McKenzie and Shakir on the roster, but the Bills could open up a spot if Stevenson wins that battle easily. Like, they'll definitely make a spot if he is the guy. But what a way for a guy like Khalil Shakir to get some early playing time at a really impactful position. That's underratedly like a really important unit to this team.
Yeah. This is a true battle. This is probably one of the toughest battles to actually project because there's so much hidden that goes into it. Like you said, Kev, so last year, I think it's pretty clear the Bills wanted Stevenson to be the returner once he was healthy, but they lost faith after he had the fumble in a big moment. Then you go back to Isaiah McKenzie, and he ends up losing the faith in that opportunity. Next thing you know, Micah Hyde's fielding punts in horrible weather games just as a safe return option. And let's be real, if Micah Hyde wanted to return punts, he probably would be a solid returner overall. You just don't want your second team all-pro safety to be put in vulnerable situations. It's going to be a battle. Tavon Austin, too, in that conversation. The question with Tavon Austin is he hasn't done it on a consistent basis since early on in his career. So if you want to make the Bills roster as that last wide receiver, this is what you need to excel at during training camp in the preseason is who wins that return battle, because that could ultimately decide whether a guy like Stevenson, Austin, I don't want to, maybe McKenzie. I don't want to say McKenzie yet, but maybe McKenzie could determine who makes the team and who misses the team amongst that group of people. Khalil Shakir will be interesting because will they baby him into the things by having him return in the beginning and then phase him into a receiver, or do they have him return? I don't know, Kev. I don't really have a great feel for that battle at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Mike, I think the returner is easily going to be Stevenson. Like, I think that he has the leg up. I think that's who they wanted to be the returner here in this offense, in this return game. I think that he's ultimately their chosen one, but I do think that you have Khalil Shakir, the ability to take that job away from him. I think that ultimately he's the one that could say, like, hey, you don't need to create a roster spot by having me be the number one returner. And that's ultimately what Khalil Shakir could bring. And then obviously you have the backup in McKenzie there to kind of back him up in that, Mike. So that's what's really important to me, that roster spot that the Bills may need. And it might come down. I think they would prefer to have Stevenson, though, like you mentioned last year. I do think that that's still in the cards. And then obviously that keeps a seventh receiver on the roster as well. But someone who we really hadn't chatted about that had a good spring, and we kind of laughed about it, Tavon Austin. So, like, we can't go too far. Like, he's got the experience. Josh Allen's called it out. Like, at some point, does Tavon Austin do enough to totally throw away all of our roster predictions, to kind of do enough to make the roster? The Bills like veterans. This isn't talking about a UDFA. This isn't talking about my guy like across the roster. If you like a certain UDFA, Watermeyer, etc. This is talking about a guy who's been one of the best returners in college football history, who has done some good things in the NFL.
Does he still have it at his age?
That's the question. Does he still have it? Does he still have it, Mike?
I mean, because if he has it, then I think maybe you go with Austin because he provides some more depth at wide receiver if you ever need him. Well, not McKenzie. With Stevenson, can you really count on him in the offense if needed? I don't know if you can at this point in time. Maybe Austin is the guy, and it'll be interesting. 7 wideouts. That's a lot to keep on a team in a roster, but with the way the NFL is changing, definitely a possibility still.
Yeah, absolutely is. So I think they're going to keep 7. I got the Bills keeping 7 receivers. That's my final prediction. It's hard to say if Austin sneaks on, if Stevenson sneaks on, but I do think the Bills are going to want that final piece of security and have a couple return options because, like you said, if someone has a fumble in a big moment, they're going to need to transition and sneak out to a different returner. And I do believe that they're going to want to have that option maybe during the game, definitely after the game. So I don't believe that they're going to want to make changes that rapidly. They're going to want that player in the system. So I do believe they keep 7 receivers. They can do different things, different packages. We're going to have to watch out for what Ken Dorsey's most interested in doing. And that leads me to tight end, Mike. It's not that interesting of a unit all around, all encompassing. It's not that crazy. You have kind of your 2 guys in OJ Howard being the number 2, and obviously Dawson Knox is your number 1 tight end. What do they do there at the 3rd? Do they just go and default to Tommy Sweeney? Do they like what they see from Watermeyer, one of the worst testing tight ends ever, but had a ton of college production at a high level? So there's a lot you can do at that tight end position. Do you stash him on the practice squad? Although they paid him good UDFA money, I know there's some of that going on at tight end, but that might come into like, what are you going to do with roster battles? And this might be the position unit that you have to eat into and only roster to put Watermeyer, even Sweeney, etc. on the practice squad in order to do that. But that's kind of what opens up this whole debate of returner is that tight end role. But then back to Dorsey, more 2 tight end sets, more 12 personnel, more 22. There's all of those factors, Mike. So ultimately, I think that they might need to still keep a 3rd tight end because I do believe they're going to want to use, as we talked about on the show many times, upgrading the running room in general, run blocking specifically. So it's going to be very interesting what they do with that tight end unit. And it's not, it's neither here nor there. Is Sweeney wins it out? Great. Do they go with a UDFA? Great. Do they go with someone like, Quentin Morris, a guy who's been up and down at times? He was elevated last year from the practice squad, another MAC player there that was elevated. So interesting, Mike. Do you keep it? Doesn't matter who. We don't need to talk too much about Sweeney versus Watermeyer versus Morris. Do you think that they go 3 tight ends, though, on the roster?
I mean, if they plan on doing a lot of 2 tight end offense this year, you definitely need some depth. You need a 3rd guy just in case. Yeah, I'd guess they'd stick with 3 to be safe. Probably give the edge to Tommy Sweeney on that. I don't really have a strong point of view either way. You got to figure, obviously, Knox is going to be the primary. OJ Howard is a strong number 2. Do you need a 3? That's up in the air. I mean, how much would Tommy Sweeney contribute to this team if he was a 3, or Quentin Morris or Watermeyer, who I know people are high on him, but it's hard for me to see him making the roster just based on the way he tested out. I understand that he had production at SEC school, and I give him credit. Like, I understand he can probably ball, but I'm not expecting a guy that was undrafted, tested poorly, to make this squad out of camp unless he really, really does impress during his limited action coming forward. I'd say they'll stick with 3, but I don't expect really much from whoever the 3rd tight end will be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, not too much, but that room does affect what the Bills do at returner. They might, if they want to go 3 tight ends and they want to roster 3 tight ends, that's where you might have to get creative and eat into the returner / 7th receiver battle. That might be really where that comes from, in my opinion, early on. I don't think it's going to come from anywhere else. As we round out the offense, you got the running back room. That's, you got, let's put aside, the fullback, you're probably going to carry the H back, the total package there. I don't believe that they're in jeopardy of, especially going to kind of that versatile offense. I don't think they're going to get rid of Reggie Gilliam, so that's safe. So we're gonna slot him on the roster. You're gonna slot Devin Singletary and James Cook on the roster. And I guess obviously Taiwan Jones too. But from there, Mike, we've talked about this on the show. Fourth running back, really third in the room. Moss versus Duke Johnson versus Raheem Blackshear. I think it's a little bit of an interesting battle.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, personally, I'm all about the 1-2 punch right now. Singletary, Cooks, James Cook. Those are the two guys I'm most focused on. You already know I still have a little bit of belief that Zach Moss might have something that we haven't seen out of him yet. Will he make the team? Who knows? We'll see. He could be right on that cut line right now. We'll see if he makes it as the third back, and then obviously you have Taiwan Jones for special teams purposes. There's other guys. Duke Johnson, quality player. I don't think he makes it. I really, once you get beyond 1-2, I'm really not too worried. It's always nice to have some additional depth, but I don't think beyond James Cook and Singletary that it's really going to make a big difference which way you go at that position.
Yeah, what's interesting is obviously if Taiwan Jones in an emergency, if you need to have him in a situation like he beat the Bills in a playoff game just a few years ago.
Look at the running backs the Bills have had since McDermott and Brandon Beane have taken over. They've had backup running backs that have been ancient, like going with guys like Frank Gore, an older LaShawn McCoy, even when he was not as old, starting out his career with McDermott and everything. The Bills have proven in the past that it really doesn't matter who they have at the backup running back positions. And right now I like the 1-2 punch. Beyond that, not really concerned.
Well, projections do have Duke Johnson getting 200 yards for the Bills this year for what that's worth. So, that's a thing. I got 100 yards receiving and a touchdown and 100 yards rushing and a touchdown from Duke Johnson.
We'll see if he even makes the team. I mean, hey, credit to him if he somehow makes it.
Yep, I got him making it over Zach Moss at this stage. I do believe Duke Johnson brings, for a vet minimum, brings a different dynamic. Back to that whole argument on but you would have Moss next year. Like, who cares? Like I don't think the Bills are thinking about one more year of Zach Moss. They're thinking about, can he make the team this year? Yes, that stuff matters when you guys at least a second running back on the team, but he's fighting for the third running back on the team now. I don't think that they're overly concerned on stashing the extra year of Zach Moss, and that's the only reason that they have to have him. So that's what makes it overall pretty interesting that the Bills have now invested multiple day 2 picks in running back, and hoping that the move here is to get a lot out of James Cook and renew Singletary at a much affordable level. A lot of these guys, that are coming off of decent years don't get huge deals at the running back position. I feel like Leonard Fournette is always underpaid, for how good he has been on good teams lately. So I don't believe Singletary is going to receive that much money. The Bills can re-up that position pretty quickly. You add him in next year, you still have Cook. You're in good shape again. So I don't have this worry that you need to stash Zach Moss for his fourth and final year, and that's the reason you need to keep him over Duke Johnson. The Bills want the best player this year, Mike. This is their aspirations. If Duke Johnson brings some more in sub packages, that's who's going to make this roster. And I also wouldn't be shocked if for some reason they carry 3 and have Raheem Blackshear on the practice squad. That's not shocking to me if they need to make roster moves elsewhere. You can use Jones in an emergency. You have Blackshear on the practice squad. I don't know. It's not that crazy to me. Or even Zach Moss is probably still eligible for the practice squad. So there's definitely some crazy ways that this could go based on the roster depth and criteria here. And as we kind of round out the offense here today, is the offensive line room. And this is an interesting room because of what's Dorsey trying to do in the run game, what's Cromer trying to do as his new style comes into play here. He's real more hard nosed kind of coach. So you got to have a lot of different elements here at the offensive line room. This is another important piece because you obviously have your 5 starters. You have Morse, Bates, you have Roger Saffold, you have and then you have the 2 tackles that you are expecting in Spencer Brown to take another leap, and then obviously Deion Dawkins. Beyond that, did the Bills go heavy O-line this year? There's some definitely, you have Ike Butker coming off an Achilles injury. You're going to have to stash him for future need. You got some good depth in Greg Van Roten just recently as a guy that's probably Greg Mance, a guy that started in the league at center and guard. So you have some really good depth at the offensive line position. Mike, is there anything of note for you as we enter Sunday? Like anything that you can say behind the starters? Like, I know you were a little bit more of a critic on that last year. What do you want to see?
I mean, I like what they did this offseason. They got a solid left guard in Roger Saffold, and then re-signing Ryan Bates. You feel good about where the line is at right now. I feel like they're going to be a much better run blocking team going forward. We've already discussed about pass blocking, how Josh Allen gets them out of so many situations just with his maneuverability. But it'd be nice to get a little bit nicer pocket for Allen, so he has more time to throw and not needing to run all over the field and make magical plays in big situations. But I like this unit. The Bills made it a priority to add depth to their offensive line this offseason beyond just adding Roger Saffold. And like you said, a lot of these guys that are going to project as backups on this Bills offensive line are guys with starting experience on other teams across the NFL. They were targeting solid run blockers that have graded out well run blocking from various football analytic websites. So it's clear they're going to try to be a little bit more physical. They're going to try to change up how they attack teams when they run the ball. And you know what? I'm happy they're doing so, because running the ball was a weakness on this team last year, and they did need a little bit more balance. And I don't know if you saw this, but the new USC head coach, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, Lincoln Riley. He was talking about balance the other day on a video I saw on Twitter, and he was describing how whenever people talk about balance, they're talking about 50-50 run pass rate. And he was saying that's not what he considers balance. He considers balance when you're attacking a defense that can't stop the pass, and being able to have the guys out there knowing if you need to pass it 85% in a game, you can, and you will expose them. But then the next week, say you have a team that has a weak defensive line or weak linebackers, and they're horrible against the run. Being able to expose a team in different ways, having the players that have different skill sets, so you can constantly attack what you're facing. And I think that's what the Bills' biggest thing that they tried to address this offseason was. They've known that they've had a good offense. And yes, in the NFL, passing is the go-to way to score a lot of points. But at moments when they were facing stronger secondaries that had solid pass rushes, they were limited at times. And you think of the Pittsburgh game, you think of just a couple games that stand out last year. Jacksonville, when they couldn't protect against the other Josh Allen. The Bills don't want that to happen again. They want to have an answer for whatever defenses can throw at them. And I think the upgrading of this offensive line, while nobody notable outside of Roger Saffold, I think it will make a larger impact than maybe any other move outside of Von Miller this offseason. So I'm excited about this O-line. Still expect the Bills to be a pass-heavy squad, but when they need to get that yard on 3rd and 1 or 4th and inches, I expect them to get it now. As compared to last year, I didn't really have a lot of confidence outside of a Josh Allen QB sneak in short situations.
What's great is there's some much better depth on this O-line this year, to the point where like guys like Ford and Hart probably aren't going to be on the roster. And like, let me read down my 9 that I have making the roster, the starting 5 of which I've already mentioned. I have Tommy Doyle making the roster. I have David Quisenberry making the roster. I have Greg Van Roten making the roster. There is 8. And then I have Ike Butker as the 9th. He's probably going to go to PUP. So with that move, you might keep a guy like Greg Mance or Cody Ford. And that's kind of my transition point here. I want to talk about Cody Ford for just a quick minute, but I'll address this cap hit on the screen. Yes, but you save actually more money cutting Moss, $800,000. I don't believe that marginal 70, 80K there is going to matter which way they go with the running back room. You save about the same money cutting either or, but then you have to pay a running back anyway. So it's negligible cap hits there, no matter what you do with Moss or with Duke Johnson. You can save about $800K on your cap, but you're going to pay someone $800K anyways. Like even let's say you keep a UDFA and Blackshear makes the roster. you're going to have to pay him $700,000 or $800,000 anyway. So that's all negligible. I don't think that all that factors in at all, no matter what they want to do there at the running back room. But for me, it's a matter of finishing up the O-line room here, kind of capping off the offense. Mike, do you have, like, straight up, do you have Cody Ford making the roster as the last offensive lineman over, knowing that Butker's going to PUP? Do you have him making it over a guy like Greg Manns or no? It's pretty straightforward.
My thought process right now is no. I think he's remained on this team last year just because he was a high round draft pick that they weren't quite ready to give up on yet. But he's just been so disappointing in his opportunities that it's hard to really give him the benefit of the doubt and hope for his potential to show at this point in time. He could make the team if he has a strong camp, but I think the offseason signings were a sign that the Bills are ready to move on from him if he gets outplayed by any of these free agent additions that they added during the offseason.
Yeah, it's interesting how much better they are depth-wise. You have Manns, you have Van Roten, and you have Quisenberry, guys who have all started in this league now as main backups on this roster. And then you add in Doyle and Butker, really, are the really 10 offensive linemen. Butker goes on to the PUP. There's your 9. Where does Cody Ford fit in? He's got, if he can't beat out of Greg Manns, it's about over for him. I'm a proponent of trading Cody Ford. What could you realistically get for him? The Bills might rather keep him over a late conditional 6th or 7th round draft choice. They don't even want to mess around with that. The cap implications of that, if they need to do anything like that, plus like what happened with, Teller alone might just distract him enough to say, we're going to roster him. We don't even want to deal with a 6th round pick. So to me, I'm not sure exactly where that Ford trade's going to go, but it's definitely something that I could see being a thing. But don't forget, Cody Ford's making $2.3 million. He's owed $800,000 dead cap. That is starting to be enough to think about saving $1.5 million for cutting him. That would pay for 2 veteran minimum guy. So that is enough to think about. Unlike the running back example, that starts to be enough to realistically say, okay, that does save me something, and that might work against him here. And Mike, that could go ahead and pay for your 9th and 10th offensive linemen. So that could be the reason that they do go ahead and make a decision for him. So I don't know. I don't believe Cody Ford's on this roster. I've seen weirder things happen. Doesn't take much. Takes one injury to really anyone. Greg Van Roten, like Butker's not back and healthy. Hart still sucks. It doesn't take too much for Ford to then sneak on the roster. That's the difference. It is a fine line. It doesn't take much, but as of today, as we enter training camp here in 5 days, I don't believe that Cody Ford has a place on this roster. But you never know. He comes into camp hungry, and Aaron Kromer does like something about him to make him the last offensive lineman. It's really not that outlandish to think about. But please, everybody, go out there, check out Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code COVER1 to match up to $100 on your first deposit. It's unlike anything you've ever done. It's fantasy football in a really cool format. Normal leagues, but you can join fantasy groups live and draft live. So it's a really cool to go ahead and get your bet-ins on that. It's a fun time with Underdog Fantasy. We'll have Cover One leagues throughout the season to join. If you're looking to add an increased presence to your fantasy lineup this season, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. Please like and subscribe. It really brings a lot to us. It really helps us bring a lot of content. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, like on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It means a lot to us, Mike. So as we get into this weekend, we kind of just broke down what we're expecting from the offense. Defense is a little bit more straightforward, but I'm going to save defense for next week's episode, kind of what we see from the defense and the team in general, but defense specifically, what it's going to look like on the safeties, what the DBs are looking like, how's his pass rush, how are we feeling about Von Miller and his playing time? There's a lot to think about, Mike. Give me a quick, and we'll end the show on a quick synopsis of the defense. And as a unit or as a position or as a player, what are you looking for before we start to see real action on Sunday?
I think it's pretty easy to point out the most interesting part on this defense right now, and that's seeing how Kaiir Elam transitions into his role with the Buffalo Bills. Right now, Trey White unless there's some miracle, he's not going to be out there at the beginning of camp. And we're going to see a lot of Kaiir Elam, and we're going to see him getting tested a lot early on. How will he look at the beginning of camp? Is he going to look like he can hold his own and step up for the Bills in a big spot where he might need to be number 1 or 2 corner to begin the season? Or is he going to get exposed and have some question marks for this Bills defense to open the year? That's the number one thing I'm paying attention to. Number 2, are we going to get any updates on the Trey White timetable? Are we going to hear good news at some point? Or are we going to hear bad news?
Good call.
What is the expectation? I think a lot of fans are expecting him to miss the first couple games of the regular season, but there is some rumors out there that he's ahead of his recovery prognosis that he originally had, and that would make me think that maybe the beginning of the season is in play. You're hearing news from other players that have ACL injuries around the same time saying they expect to be available for the start of the regular season. So that's a big question, especially when you're playing talented teams like the LA Rams and Tennessee Titans back-to-back weeks to open the regular year. And then the only other things I'm really paying attention to on this defense, the newcomers on this unit, I want to see how Tim Settle looks. Obviously, Von Miller. Well, I shouldn't even have said Kaiir Elam. Von Miller is the biggest story going on this defense to start training camp. Kaiir Elam maybe number 2. But I want to see how Von Miller looks in the red, white, and blue. I want to see Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, see how all these guys to the defensive
line, new names
fit in with this squad. Just a totally revamped defensive line that I expect to be much improved overall. And then looking at linebacker, Terrell Bernard, what's his role going to be? Is he going to be someone that's going to get some play early on in the season, or is he going to be a special teamer that they're going to try to develop slowly? Just so many storylines overall. We talked about the ones on the offensive side of the ball, but defensive side of the ball has a lot of fun things going on too. So can't wait to just take a look at everything going on with this team and how it all comes together.
And we appreciate the live active audience here today on Tuesdays at 7. It's our new showtime. We got into this primetime slot here from our Fridays. We appreciate everybody sticking with us on Fridays for many, many, many months as we finally transition into this Tuesday slot where we'll stay all season. We're going to have great guests following games. We're going to recap games, but then we're going to bring you great guests for the following shows. And maybe you'll see us on a Friday if we need to do any pre-game shows with some guests. Kind of as a flex day for us. So we really appreciate that. And you guys are going to love the guests we're going to bring in here. They're going to be great guests, really informative, who are going to actually talk football and maybe bring in their audience as well to combat all of our pro Bills discussion going forward. But for me, straight up, I didn't hate Mike's first prediction of Kaiir Elam, because to me, I thought that was the biggest weakness on the roster, cornerback 2. We can hide it however we want. We can say he had good moments, but upgrading from Levi Wallace was an important piece to me, and it was definitely the move that the Bills needed to do. For me, running back and cornerback were the 2 weaknesses on this team. They addressed them in back-to-back rounds. The Bills agreed. If Kaiir Elam was gone, was Bryce Hall the pick there? I tend to think so. So to me, it's very interesting what the Bills decided on being their weakness. They invested a cornerback very early in the draft. When everybody says after Trey White, they don't invest corner, they don't do a cornerback 2, they don't do cornerback 2. They did cornerback 2 at a pretty high asset price point. So, they traded up. That's how much they traded away a 4, which could have been Khalil Shakir anyways, up to get into the range to make sure that they secured Kaiir Elam. So they like him. He has all the makings to be a premier cornerback 2 in this league. And then really interesting point, Mike, on Trey White. That is something I'm watching. Is the new norm 7, 8, 9 months now than instead of 12 months? I do think that with sports technology, science in general, and the rehab room and facilities and workload and statistics and training methods, that I think you can shave a couple of months off of what used to be the norm for a high school athlete of 12 months to now being 9 months. And as we're approaching 9 months soon, the injury happened in November. We'll call it closing in on 8 months post-injury or post-surgery in early August. You're getting to a range 9 months where you might start feeling comfortable that
I bet you he's going to want to play as soon as possible.
Week 1. Yeah.
And you look at the LA Rams, that's a prove-it game against the defending Super Bowl champs on prime time to open the season. You're going up against not only the best receiver in the NFL from last season, Cooper Kupp, but now you have Allen Robinson across the field too. That could be a nightmare matchup for the Bills if they don't have Trey White out on the field. So, yes, you don't want to rush him. You don't want to put him in a situation if he's not healthy enough to be out there. But don't just assume that he won't be ready for that. I think we have been basing our projected recovery timetables based too much off of past recoveries from 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Those timetables, as you mentioned, are changing due to upgrades in sports science. And that's how everything is. Injuries that happened 20 years ago that would have ended a career do not end all careers now. So as we make these
Cam Akers came back in 6 months. Speaking of the Rams.
As we make these advancements, we have to also change our expectations for recovery timetables. And I'm not guaranteeing that Trey White is going to be back for the start of the regular season, but I also think it would be equally ignorant to say that you're guaranteeing he won't be back for the start of the regular season. Most likely, it's probably a 50-50 toss-up when his timetable's back. It's asking a lot for him to be back in a month and a half, but we'll find out a lot more in the upcoming weeks where he's actually at.
Right. And as you get into that, and then the 10 days to the Monday night game against the Titans, will that be the final 10 days that he needs to get on the field? If the Bills only have to sit him a week, they might have to make a business decision and do so to get him toward full strength. And I'm still not counting out an active game day platoon or just to get him there playing certain downs and distances, certain situations. I don't think it's crazy that they'll do that. But maybe they'll, if they wouldn't do that, then they're going to wait the 10 days and get him in against the Titans or longer. So lots to look forward to, but that is definitely one of the things that we're looking out for here at the Going Deep podcast. We're going to be paying a close attention to the corner room all off season long. So stay tuned for us for those updates. And that's going to be where I'm focusing personally. And Mike might pick something else, but I'm going to be focusing on the cornerbacks and seeing where Kaiir Elam fits in. What are they going to do behind them? While Trey's not playing originally, how's that looking? Are they going Dane Jackson day one? Is there anything sneaky going on? Do they do something else? But I think you start to see a bad sign if they start to call up a free agent cornerback, but there still are a couple that I think will get a call here in August that could be cornerback level players. So I do think that could be telling if they go out and grab somebody that is a fringe starter in free agency. Those guys are still waiting for positions. And, we've talked about many of them on this show, Mike, about who the Bills could go and acquire. If you see one of those, that might be a more telling sign of things to come for Trey White. So from the Going Deep podcast, so we really appreciate everybody tuning in for our 7:00 hour. Anybody on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, we really appreciate the audio listeners as well. Feel free to chat in and tweet and text your questions to us as well. But we have a lot to do. We have a lot to plan for the next coming week. We're going to have an action-packed Tuesday show right coming off of the early days of training camp. We're going to have a lot of great content, a lot of stuff happening Sunday, a lot of live stuff happening Monday. And then we'll be right back at our normal slot from our studios here on Tuesday to do our normally scheduled show with some really good notes and observations from the Going Deep podcast presented by the Cover One Podcast Network. But from everybody here, we really appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you get out to Uncle Jumbo's if you're local in Buffalo. If not, say hi to us at Fisher. If neither, we really appreciate all the virtual and audio listeners. But I'm Kevin, and that's Mike. We really look forward to seeing everybody shortly. And it's time, guys. Next time we talk to you, we'll have some live football. We'll catch you soon.
Josh Allen, looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.